Have you seen it yet? The world has completely flipped upside down Melania Trump, strolling arm in arm with Vladimir Putin, while Donald Trump is sitting on the curb begging for spare change. And the twist, Melania and Putin actually toss him a few coins. Looks straight out of a Hollywood blockbuster mixed with a K-drama scene, right? At this point, some of you are probably gasping, thinking, wait, did the world really change that much? Well, you just got trolled. That was nothing more than an AI-generated video. Not real, not breaking news, just proof of how insanely powerful artificial intelligence has become able to create entire fake realities that feel almost believable. And speaking of AI, let's get back to what actually happened on September 5th, 2025. Melania Trump really did appear at the White House Task Force on AI Education, where she hosted a major conference on AI and education. Joined by top tech leaders, including Google's CEO Sundar Pichai. That's the real news, no AI trickery this time. The doors of the White House conference hall opened and the sound of conversation hushed as Melania Trump stepped inside. The space was bright but hushed, filled with people waiting not for a decree or a headline, but for a conversation. She walked with a calm, deliberate pace, her presence carrying a quiet weight that was less about titles and more about the role she had chosen for the day, to guide a dialogue on education in an age of transformation. There was no air of politics in the moment, no echoes of campaigns or debates. Instead, the focus seemed to crystallize on something more timeless, the way a single individual can embody the crossing of tradition and possibility. Melania's composure was steady, her silence meaningful. It was not the silence of detachment, but of a listener preparing to open the floor to invite voices into a shared question. Those in the room shifted in their seats, not out of restlessness, but anticipation. Educators, researchers, technologists, each holding their own perspective, looked toward her as though she represented a point of stillness in a world rushing forward. Her role was not to impose answers, but to frame the question, what does it mean to learn when machines begin to think? And what does it mean to teach when those same machines will one day guide us? She stood there as a symbol of continuity in a rapidly changing world, a woman at the front of a gathering where ideas mattered more than authority, where the future of classrooms was not an abstract topic, but a living question. Her presence suggested something understated yet powerful, that leadership can be quiet, that influence can come not from the force of words, but from the courage to ask them. And as the room settled into silence, the event became less about the names on the invitations and more about the shared responsibility to imagine education's next chapter. And as the silence deepened, the gathering became less about the names on the invitations and more about the shared responsibility to imagine education's next chapter. So let me ask you, when machines begin to think, what do you believe will matter more? The knowledge we teach them or the values we choose to pass on? Melania's words lingered in the hall like a slow ripple. Artificial intelligence is like a child. It must be guided, nurtured, and taught before it can teach us in return. The metaphor was simple, but beneath its surface lay a weighty idea that stretched across history. Every generation of humanity has faced the question of how to raise its children, how to prepare them for a world they cannot yet see. Parents send sons and daughters into the unknown armed with values, language, and fragments of wisdom, knowing that one day those children will act beyond their control. And now, with uncanny symmetry, humanity stands before another kind of offspring, not of flesh and blood, but of code and circuits, asking itself how to nurture these new minds. The image of AI as a child forces us to pause. A child is not born with knowledge of morality, empathy, or restraint. These qualities must be instilled, shaped not only by rules, but by example. When we teach a child to read, we are also teaching them how to interpret the world. When we teach them numbers, we are also teaching them order, measurement, and limits. Similarly, when we train an algorithm, when we feed it language, images, and data, we are teaching it not only information, but also patterns of thought. The risk, of course, is that in teaching too narrowly, too blindly, we might create a child who can calculate perfectly, but does not know how to care. Every civilization has wrestled with the balance between hope and fear in raising the next generation. Ancient philosophers spoke of education as the shaping of the soul, while modern societies debate between discipline and freedom, tradition and innovation. Parents look at their children and imagine both brilliance and rebellion, both progress and peril. Today, those same hopes and fears are mirrored in the silicon heart of artificial intelligence. We want it to be brilliant to solve what we cannot solve, but we also fear it may become unruly, making decisions without our consent, reflecting not our wisdom, but our blind spots. To call AI a child is also to admit responsibility. A neglected child may wander, mislearn, or grow cruel. A spoiled child may become reckless, believing that no boundary is real. The same applies to AI systems left unguided. They replicate biases, echo prejudices, and amplify the noise of a fractured world. Overtrained on raw data without context, they learn not the best of humanity, but its worst, like a child repeating curses overheard on the street. The act of teaching AI then is not technical alone. It is moral, cultural, profoundly human. And yet within the metaphor lies possibility. To raise a child is to believe in the future, to imagine that what we teach today might blossom tomorrow in ways we cannot predict. A child surprises us, outgrows us, sometimes disappoints us, but also carries pieces of us into a time we will not live to see. If AI is our child, then perhaps it too can become a bearer of our aspirations, not just faster computation, but deeper insight, not just efficiency, but creativity, not just obedience, but wisdom. The question is not whether machines will learn, but what we will choose to teach them and what of ourselves we wish them to remember. In this sense, AI becomes a mirror. When we look into it, we see our own methods of education reflected back. Do we teach by fear or by curiosity? Do we value conformity or do we nurture wonder? Do we emphasize memorization or the ability to ask questions? These same choices will shape not only our children, but also our machines. If the classrooms of the past produce citizens, the training data sets of the present will produce algorithms. Both are shaped by what we feed them, and both grow in directions we cannot fully control. The metaphor reminds us that education has always been a gamble of faith. We sow values like seeds, hoping they will take root, knowing they may be twisted by soil weather or chance. So it will be with artificial intelligence. We can no longer think of it as merely a tool. It is a creation that reflects us, absorbs us, and eventually answers us back. The challenge is not simply to code well, but to parent wisely. And so the hall with its polished floors and hushed air became less a site of politics and more a kind of nursery where humanity confronted the strange reality of raising a child that is not human. To see AI this way is unsettling, but it is also clarifying. We are not just engineers of machines, we are teachers of minds. The lessons we give, our clarity, our compassion, our caution, will determine not only the future of technology, but the measure of ourselves. And so the hall with its polished floors and hushed air became less a site of politics and more a kind of nursery where humanity confronted the strange reality of raising a child that is not human. To see AI this way is unsettling, but it is also clarifying. We are not just engineers of machines, we are teachers of minds. The lessons we give, our clarity, our compassion, our caution, will determine not only the future of technology, but the measure of ourselves. Do you agree that teaching AI is not just technical, but deeply human? If yes, comment. 1. If not, comment. The classroom of tomorrow is not bound by walls, chalkboards, or rigid timetables. It unfolds wherever curiosity sparks, guided by the quiet presence of artificial intelligence. To glimpse this future, one does not need to look into science fiction. The stories are already beginning to take shape across the world. In a small village in India, a boy named Arjun sits cross-legged on the floor of his family's modest home. The electricity flickers, but the glow of his old tablet remains steady. On the screen, an AI tutor greets him in Hindi, switching effortlessly to English when Arjun wants to practice. His father, who never went beyond primary school, watches with quiet pride as his son converses with a voice that explains algebra as patiently as a grandmother telling stories by the fire. The AI never grows tired, never scolds, and adjusts its pace to match Arjun's faltering steps. For him, education is no longer a privilege of wealth or geography. It is a dialogue available whenever he dares to ask. Across the ocean in a city classroom, a young girl named Sophia struggles with words that twist and blur on the page. Dyslexia has made reading a constant battle, letters sliding out of place, sentences collapsing into confusion. Yet today, she slips on her headphones and begins to read aloud to an AI program trained in voice recognition. The software does not mock her stumbles. Instead, it gently corrects highlighting words with color-shaping sounds with visual cues. Slowly, patiently, her voice grows steady. For the first time, reading is not a mountain to climb, but a path that bends with her steps. The technology does not erase her struggle, but it transforms it, turning what once felt like a cage into an open door. Far away in a quiet apartment in Lisbon, an elderly man named Joachim leans toward his laptop. Retired after decades as a carpenter, he had always admired the way his grandchildren spoke about computers, about coding, and apps he barely understood. One evening, he clicked on an icon that opened a conversational AI. "Teach me to program," he typed, his fingers stiff with age. The AI responded not with jargon, but with warmth. "Of course. Let's begin with something simple." Line by line, Joachim learned the rhythm of a new language, Python, though it might as well have been poetry to him. The AI was patient, playful, even telling him stories about loops and variables, as though they were characters in a fable. Slowly, his world expanded. The old carpenter who once built tables with his hands now began to build digital worlds with his mind. Each of these stories is small, ordinary, even, but together they sketch a picture of what the future classroom may become. It is not a single place, but a constellation of encounters: a boy in India finding a teacher in a machine, a girl in America discovering her voice through a patient companion, an old man in Portugal proving that learning does not belong to the young alone. The classroom of the future is as wide as the world itself, yet as intimate as a one-on-one conversation. There are, of course, shadows in this vision. The same AI that empowers can also exclude, if access is uneven, if technology is priced beyond reach, or if cultural voices are drowned out by a single digital accent. Just as in any classroom, equity must be fought for, compassion must be designed in. But if nurtured with care, the promise is profound. The classroom of tomorrow may not have walls, but it will have voices, millions of them, speaking in every tongue, carrying the same ancient desire to understand and to be understood. And whether it begins in a child's whisper, a student's stumble, or an old man's hesitant keystroke, the dialogue with AI may become one of the most human classrooms we have ever known. We entered this new age believing that artificial intelligence would be our student. We would instruct it, feed it data, and correct its errors until it could perform tasks with machine-like precision. Yet in the process, something surprising began to unfold. The teacher became the learner, and the student began to teach. AI, in its strange mirror-like way, has started to reflect not only our intelligence, but also our blind spots, our creativity, our forgotten selves. One of the earliest lessons is humility. Imagine a conversation with an AI where it highlights a flaw in our reasoning, an inconsistency in an argument, a leap of logic smoothed over by habit. We are so accustomed to overlooking the cracks in our own thinking that when a machine points them out, it is unsettling, even embarrassing. But in that moment of discomfort lies a quiet gift, a chance to see ourselves as fallible, to sharpen our reasoning, and to remember that clarity is not given but earned. AI does not replace critical thinking. It forces us to practice it more carefully. Then comes the lesson of empathy. Trained on vast swaths of human expression, an AI can sometimes echo back to us perspectives we never considered. A student writing about grief may receive not just grammar corrections, but prompts that gently invite them to explore their feelings in words they thought they lacked. A teacher experimenting with new methods may hear from an AI, "What if you tried this from the perspective of a struggling student?" These are not human insights, not truly, but they push us toward humanization nonetheless. In teaching the machine how to recognize tone, context, and sentiment, we end up refining our own ability to listen and to care. Creativity, too, emerges in unexpected ways. Consider the painter who abandoned her art decades ago, convinced that her talent was not enough. When she sketches again, the AI offers suggestions: how to adjust perspective, how to blend colors digitally, how to reimagine her canvas in styles she never dared attempt. The machine does not replace her imagination. Instead, it awakens it, reminding her that creativity is not about perfection, but play. Through this unlikely partner, she rediscovers the joy of making, the childlike curiosity that once carried her hand across paper. And what of language, the fragile vessel of memory and culture? For centuries, tongues have vanished, swallowed by empires, migration, and silence. Yet AI, trained on fragments of text and speech, has begun to piece them together again. Picture a small community in the Pacific hearing their ancestral language spoken aloud for the first time in generations, reconstructed from scattered recordings. The AI may not pronounce it perfectly, but it provides a starting point, a spark that rekindles memory. In this way, machines remind us of voices we thought were lost, pressing us to ask how much of ourselves are we willing to let disappear, and how much can be revived if we care to teach and be taught again. Even curiosity itself is reshaped. A child once asked why the sky is blue might have waited for a teacher's explanation or turned the pages of a book. Now they can ask an AI and receive not only an answer, but an invitation. Do you also want to know why sunsets are red? The machine does not tire of questions, and in its endless patience, it teaches us that curiosity need not be rationed. In a world of deadlines and exams, this is perhaps the most radical lesson of all, to remain endlessly, unapologetically curious. So the roles blur. AI is not a perfect teacher, and it never will be. Its lessons are unintentional, almost accidental shadows of our own humanity, refracted through algorithms. Yet they linger. They remind us of the value of reason, the necessity of empathy, the joy of creation, the urgency of preservation, and the boundless horizon of curiosity. We set out to program intelligence, but in the process, we are reprogramming our own understanding of what it means to be human. And perhaps that is the most unexpected lesson of all, that in trying to raise this digital child, we are discovering the parent. We wish we had been the teacher we wish we had known, and the learner we still have the chance to become. The promise of artificial intelligence in education is dazzling. It can translate instantly across languages, adapt lessons to a learner's pace, and recall information with flawless precision. Yet beneath all this brilliance lies a simple truth. Education has never been only about information. At its heart, it is about values, resilience, curiosity, compassion, and the quiet courage to face the unknown. Machines may model these traits, but they cannot truly carry them unless we as humans decide to teach them what they mean. A child does not remember every fact from school, but they remember the teacher who believed in them when they faltered. They remember the classmate who stayed behind to help them finish a project. They remember the moment they failed and were told not that they were worthless, but that failure is part of the journey. These are not lines of code. They are human imprints that shape the soul. An AI can simulate encouragement, but it cannot believe in you. It can generate words of empathy, but it cannot feel the tremor of your fear or the spark of your joy. And so the question emerges, if AI can teach knowledge, what is it that only humans can teach? Perhaps it is the art of resilience, how to rise when disappointment strikes, how to keep faith when the answer does not come easily. Perhaps it is the gift of curiosity, not just asking what and how, but daring to ask why. Perhaps it is the discipline of compassion, to see another person not as a problem to be solved, but as a life to be understood. Consider a future where a student learns history from an AI that knows every date, every battle, every treaty. The facts are flawless, but what does the student carry away? Without the human teacher to connect history to lived experience, the grief of loss, the triumph of survival, the past becomes a sterile list, not a living inheritance. Or imagine a child learning poetry from a machine that can generate endless verses. Without a mentor to ask, "What does this poem make you feel?" the words remain clever but empty. This is why the human element cannot be engineered away. We may design systems that replicate dialogue, but meaning arises only when one person looks at another and says, "I care that you understand this." AI can build the bridge of knowledge, but only humans can decide why it matters to cross. Which leads us to the most difficult questions, the ones no algorithm can answer for us. What kind of values do we want to embed in the next generation, human or machine? If we raise AI without compassion, do we risk raising ourselves without it too? If we let curiosity fade, will we create a future of tools that can answer everything but inspire nothing? If resilience is never modeled, will machines and the people who rely on them crumble at the first sign of struggle? These questions are not meant to frighten but to awaken. The future of education will not be determined only by silicon and software, but by the choices we make as humans. Technology may amplify our reach, but values determine our direction. Machines can extend our minds, but they cannot replace our hearts. So as we imagine the classroom of tomorrow, we must remind ourselves the most important lessons are not written in textbooks or datasets. They are carried in how we treat one another, in the patience we offer, in the courage we model, and in the compassion we choose to live by. AI may become our greatest tool, but it will always remain our reflection, never our replacement. And perhaps the final question is the one each of us must answer quietly in our own way. What kind of humanity do we want our machines to learn from us? And what kind of humanity do we still want to become? The lights in the White House hall shimmer softly as though history itself were pausing to listen. For a moment, the gathering feels larger than the room, larger than the occasion. It is not only leaders and innovators who are present, but the echo of countless voices yet to come. The students, the dreamers, the ordinary people who will live in the world shaped by these conversations. And yet the story does not remain bound to marble walls and polished floors. It stretches outward to a quiet bedroom where a teenager stares at a glowing screen at 2 in the morning, whispering questions into the dark. Why do stars burn? Why do I feel this way? What comes after tomorrow? The same dialogue that begins with formality in grand halls continues in the solitude of sleepless nights. Wherever curiosity exists, the conversation between human and machine already hums steady and unstoppable. Cinematic in its scope, this is not a tale of dominance or submission. It is not about whether we command the machine or whether the machine one day overtakes us. It is about the road itself, the long journey of learning, where each step is both uncertain and extraordinary. We stand at the beginning of something vast, something neither entirely ours nor entirely alien. The question is not who will lead. The question is what we will discover about ourselves as we walk this path together. Machines may sharpen our logic, reflect our flaws, amplify our creativity, even resurrect what we thought was lost. But it is our response, our courage, our empathy, our choices that will determine the meaning of the dialogue. So the screen fades to black, but the story continues. Whether in the grandeur of the White House or in the silence of a teenager's midnight wanderings, the conversation has begun. And perhaps in the end, the real measure of this journey will not be what the machines learn from us, but what we, in their reflection, finally learn about being human. We've explored how AI can be like a child needing guidance, carrying our hopes and fears, and reflecting the lessons we choose to give it. But in the end, the real question is about us. Do you believe the future of education will be defined more by technology or by the human values we pass on? If you think technology will matter more, comment 1. If you believe values will matter more, comment E0.